Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video I'll be reviewing the mini-adventure Town Musicians of Bremen, designed by Lucas Zellers for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shouts to my platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Basil, Tom, Huskgirl124, and Wizard Princess. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos de Vicente Gilberto, Sean A.K., Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Arash, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy619, Sklenia, and Nick. Thank you all very much for your support. Town Musicians of Bremen is a adventure for Tier 1, levels 1 through 4, and is based on a German folk story of the exact same name, which is one that I wasn't specifically familiar with, but I think I was tangentially aware of. At least the concept of... So I think it's where the idea of animals or creatures or even people that scare an enemy by combining themselves, like either dressing up together or somehow making themselves into a monstrous form. I think that trope comes from this story, because the story is this aging, and it's about livestock animals who have gotten older to where their usefulness has run out, and it starts off with a donkey, and then the donkey he's on the road to Bremen to be a musician. It's supposed to be a funny kind of children's story, and the donkey meets a dog, and then they meet the cat, and they meet the rooster, and then they're all together, and then they want to go to this house as kind of a rest stop and scare the robbers inside by just kind of combining. They stack on top of each other and kind of yell all at once, and that scares the robbers. Then when the robber comes back to check out the house and see what the hell was going on, they kind of do the same thing, but they actually attack with various hooves and claws and things, and then the robbers think it's some kind of horrible monster. And I think it's been repeated obviously in a lot of different movies and cartoons and books and things, and the one that I thought of the most, and if you have school-age children or thereabouts, you probably read the similar story, but Room on the Broom is basically a retelling kind of to this story, where you pick up different animals along the way, and it even has at the end where they all kind of combine themselves into this monstrous thing to scare the enemy. So a really good story, Room on the Broom. How do you make that into a D&D adventure? Well, in this case, it uses the concept of finding these animals on the road and turns them into encounters. And the unique twist, of course, obviously they're fantastical, monstrous encounters. They're still categorized as here's the equine encounter, here's the canine encounter, here's the feline encounter, etc. But what the designer does here is creates multiple paths for each of these encounters by theme. So for example, you could do a they call them tracks here. If you can picture literally this road, which is a linear gauntlet style adventure where you go from point A to point E, and you're supposed to just go along. There's no choices to be made. You just go along this path, and you can choose, or the DM can choose, and it says you're basically supposed to roll for each time, for each checkpoint you reach for each of the animals, each of these encounters. And there's Fae, Shape Changer, Celestial, Fiend, Monstrosity, and then just Bonus, which is kind of just beasts and bandits from what I can tell. Which is not a bad idea. It's still an awkward transition to turn that into a D&D adventure, because it is very linear, and it's basically just encounters. But I will say, the encounters themselves, it's not just hey, you run across 1d2 owlbears or something. It's actually no, you see a bunny rabbit hop across the road, and all of a sudden this owlbear comes crashing through and then turns to attack you. I mean, at least some of them are, at least more than half of them are just combat encounters, but at least there are paragraphs included that detail what is going on. I wish that they had been organized a little bit better, instead of just paragraphs like this, at least done the actual animals that you face in bold instead of italicized, because it's a little bit trickier to see them. But I think it's an interesting concept and idea. First of all, always include a cover page on your adventure, and there is a cover page that exists. You saw it on my opener, but you need to include that in your actual product. I've seen this several times before with products that I've reviewed. Please include your cover page in your actual product. It makes for a very short adventure because once you get through all of these encounters, and again, you can choose to either do all of one of them, or you can, as the DM, roll a d6 for each one of these encounters. And once you get through them, then you do the house encounter, which is called the taking, and then the keeping, which is in line with the folk story, which is first you come across this building, which changes depending on which path that you want to end up using. So in the celestial track, it is a church filled with acolytes. Or if it's a monstrosity, then it's a moldy hut filled with goblins. It just kind of can change depending on whatever you want it to be. And the idea is you can replay this whole thing with different groups or even the same group depending on which tracks you choose. Now, here's how I would fix this. Because I don't think it's particularly satisfying if the DM is just picking a path and presenting that to the players and you're just going along these encounters. I mean, it's pretty simple. It would be easy to run. And I do appreciate that a lot of the encounters, yes, a lot of them are combat, but some of them are more than combat. For example, you can come across a Pegasus, and it's an animal handling check to calm it down, and then a medicine check to heal it, and that completes the encounter. They're not all out to kill you. Some of them are, and I think all of the cats actually are, which, those are cats for you. Saber-toothed tiger, this gallows cat creature, foo lions, were-tiger. They're basically all there to fight you in different ways. Some of them are stealthy. Some of them you actually see right there, and they just kind of challenge you to a duel. But a lot of them are there's like a jackal were who might try to deceive you, or there's a coatl that appears and asks you a bunch of questions, and if you're truthful or something, then and you pass persuasion checks, and you can complete that. And so they're not all combat encounters, which I appreciate. And as I mentioned, they're all detailed, and they all are well written and interesting. They're not just, hey, you come across a 1d4 whatever and they attack. So I appreciate that they're more than that, but I don't think it's that satisfying to just have a bunch of encounters on a road. And I don't know if anybody would necessarily even understand the folk story that you're trying to get across here. Unlike something that's, like if you did, I don't know, Wizard of Oz or something, or a more recent like movie story. There's some way where you would be more of a like, oh, everybody's got that light bulb moment of like, okay, I know what we're doing, or like Goldilocks and the Three Bears or something. If you did that, it would be very obvious, and then you could do it more literal. But in this case, I don't. For me personally, I don't, and my group, I don't think anybody would actually understand the folk story that they would be playing through in this case. And because it changes things up enough to where, would they even understand that there's a Pegasus in one, and then a griffin in the other, and an owl bear at the end? Would they even get that was those four, those animals put together? And then you finally get to the house, and if you're not using the bandits, you could be using something completely different. So if you're using the shape changer route, which is a bunch of were people, then it's Yuan Ti inside just a house, and they're worshiping, their Yuan Ti god. And then the keeping is basically just the same encounter, but instead you're in the house already, and then they come, and then usually a stronger enemy comes and knocks on the door, and then you have to defend it, just D&D style. And by the way, this is levels 1 through 4, but there's obviously a huge world of difference between a level 1 party and a level 4 party. I can't imagine a level 1 party would be able to survive any of this at all, so I would recommend probably more like levels 3 and 4 if you actually... And it does say you can use some short rests, but obviously not designed for long rests here. The way that I would fix this primarily, and I think this would actually make things a lot more interesting, is if you made each of these tracks, which I'm using the terminology from the designer, but we'll go back to this table here, where each of these different thematic encounters would be a choice by the players. And the way I would do that is you'd have to create a kind of special supernatural realm where the players are trying to get from one location to another. And the bad thing is, in here, in the folk story, I don't think they ever do make it to Bremen. The idea is they stop at the house and just kind of start a new life there, basically. So there's no real ending here, there's no real ending for the adventure either. But the way I would do it is you let the players choose, and if you create this supernatural setting where they see like a signpost, for example, that has the road forking off into, whichever themes you want to use, all 5 of them. They have 5 different forks going off this road that they all lead to the destination the players need to get to, but they can choose which path to take. And I would make it so I don't describe exactly what the players are going to encounter, but I would let them have an idea. So, for example, have a symbol representing the celestial path, and have a symbol representing the fiend path, have a symbol representing the fae and the shape changer. Those are probably the 4 I would use, just because I don't think the other 2 have as quite of good of themes. Maybe I would combine monster and bonus to make some kind of like a bestial theme. But I think that would work out really fun. And you could even do a thing where the party decides on one path, and maybe you can eliminate others based on how it branches. So, for example, if you go celestial, maybe you don't want to let them immediately go to the fiend path. Maybe they then have to go to shape changer if they didn't want to go to fiend. You could get really complicated with it if you wanted to. But let the players choose, and then maybe after the first or second one, they start realizing, okay, because we chose the whatever symbol you want to use for fiend or something, or even just like the word written in infernal or something, and they could get the ideas, okay, we're gonna fight demonic enemies or encounter demonic creatures if we choose this path versus if we choose the one with the symbol of the I don't know, I'm picturing like the Animorph with the face turning into a lizard or something. If we choose that path, then we're going to meet more werefolks, and that could be dangerous, or that could be something that we could handle. So I like the idea of making it player-driven, and then you could even take it a little bit further and have it be that the final building that they make it to, which is kind of the finale of this entire mini-adventure, is whichever path they chose most often, which I think only works if you eliminate some of them, because obviously if they do like one of each, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble there. Or maybe you just tell which one the players enjoyed the most, or you could make it, or give them a chance at the end, show them a little building symbol, and then make the choices again, and they can just choose. But I think by making it player driven, that takes away a lot of that railroad nature of having it just be this straight road of encounters, which the designer basically says that's what this is. I don't have any interest in a replayable adventure. I'm sure people that play, obviously, like Adventurers League stuff and need to play through that stuff, that it would be appealing. But for me, I'm just looking at playing something once for a group, and that's it. And that's the way I would be able to maximize my enjoyment of this particular adventure, would be to make all of these different encounters a choice, not literally telling them, hey, if you choose this path, you're going to meet a Pegasus that needs healing. Instead, just show the symbol of the Celestial, and then if they choose it, then they encounter a Pegasus. And then you've got the players always wondering, oh, I wonder what happens if we had chosen, and you can show even the symbol of like a horse or a dog, and then different, and maybe you show the signpost has the animal picture, and then the paths all have symbols of, like, here's the symbol of a fae, and here's the symbol of a shape changer. And then the players, after the first or second path, are like, oh, okay, I know what's going on here. And they might still not understand what the actual folk story is, but at that point it doesn't matter. You've created an interesting situation where, the players get to make that choice, be more involved in the adventure, because otherwise it really is just a linear gauntlet series of encounters. Yeah, the encounters are kind of interesting, but there's otherwise not a whole lot going on here, and especially the house is basically just the same thing, and even worse when it comes to mostly combat encounters, with the exception of the bonus track, which I'm not even sure what the bonus track is supposed to be for theme-wise. It just literally says under the tracks, bonus 1 for funsies. I don't, it's just like other. But I do like that the bandits are there at the end, which is more in keeping with the original story, and the actual event is you can join them for you can join their card game for a sleight of hand check, which I think would be a lot of fun. That would kind of be different from just a regular fight, which most of them are, but then you can still do the fight when the veterans come in and knock on the door afterwards in the keeping section. It is a bummer that there's no real epilogue here. That's kind of a problem with the story as well, because the adventure hook you've given to the players, again, using this weird supernatural fairy tale setting, is that they have to make it to this town, but the actual epilogue is, well, it doesn't actually matter if you make it to the town or not. There's no that's not even part of the story. It's just, the story is just the journey is the destination. So that's obviously disappointing that that we couldn't think of something to do even though that was still the actual adventure hook. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's only a 10-page mini adventure. It's very, very short. We do get some extra stat blocks here for any of the new creatures, mainly because the designer was like, hey, we're missing a lot of celestial creatures in the monster manual, so they gave us some more. I do like the fact that we get some nice appendices for only a 10-page adventure, two important ones. One of them is a table of all of the monsters used here, their CR rating, and where you can find them in the monster manual. Huge thumbs up to that. And an entire reading of the original, I guess it's not a poem, it's a fable or short story of the town musicians of Bremen, which is included here. And it's a very short story, and it's written, it's very, it's got some ye old language in it, but otherwise it's pretty easy to read, and it's kind of fun. And I think that's a very important thing, because the adventure is very heavily based on that short story. And I love that it does mention in the beginning, hey, this is based on this, very classic German folk story. And then I'm thinking, okay, I've got to Google it and look it up and figure out what that is. And then at the very end, it's like, oh, here's the entire short story for you to read. Hey, that's good. I like that. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Town Musicians of Bremen. Pros: each of the 20+ encounters are detailed and interesting. This was a key component of why I enjoyed this adventure, at least the parts that I enjoyed, is that it's not just a bunch of throwaway, tables of encounters. These are actually pretty well detailed. They've got some good notes in there. Some of them are more social and role-playing. Others are skill checks. And a lot of them are combat. But I did appreciate there were at least paragraphs here. And pro, I liked the appendices at the end, specifically including the entire original short story that it's based on, because it's so heavily based on it that I like that that was included. Cons: the epilogue, there's no real ending to this. There's no real ending to the short story in terms of they don't really make it to the destination or anything. And same thing here. There's no good epilogue. I mean, it just, one of them is characters live in the house together as it gradually becomes a home. They meet other travelers on the road to Bremen and pass on wisdom they learned when they walked the road. Okay, are we just ending the entire campaign here at this story then? Is it just supposed to be a one-shot? So that part's very bizarre. And there's no maps, which is always a bummer. And I feel like you could have gotten away with just 2 maps to do this entire adventure, despite 20+ encounters. You could have given me 1 map that's on a road, and then I could have swatted in any kind of, all these encounters on there. 1 road map and 1 building map. Granted, the building map would have been trickier because some of them are supposed to be different kinds of buildings, but maybe just give me an interior of a basic and then we can switch things up from there. But no maps whatsoever is a bummer, especially because it's going to be very, very combat heavy for at least half these encounters. Final verdict: the original folk story of Town Musicians of Bremen makes for an awkward D&D adventure that could be improved by making the different encounter themes entirely player-driven. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.